Hey, and thank you for joining us for this episode of the Marketing Guides for Small Business podcast. My name is Ian, and I'm joined by Ken and Paul. And Jen has some recordings for us because she's traveling today. But together, we are your marketing guides for small business. Are you a plumber? And are you the same as every plumber on the planet? Or do you do things better than every other plumber? Is there something that sets you apart? Are you a business coach that's the best at what you do? Or a dentist that uniquely serves your marketplace? Those are just a few examples, but whatever your business is, my guess would be that you think you offer a better service or a product than anyone else in the marketplace. It's probably a driving force behind what you do. But do people looking for your product or service know about this core difference, this difference that makes you special and makes you attractive to choose? Well, today your marketing guides are going to look at this foundational topic of what a core difference is, why your business needs one, how to go about creating one, and how to leverage it powerfully in your business. So I'm going to start off by asking Ken a question. Ken, let's start off with, what is a core difference?
Well, a core difference is not where we're a roofing company that serves everybody in the St. Louis metro area. You've got to have, uh, that differentiates nothing. Um, so a core difference is really trying to drill down and find out what it is that makes your business different. And we talk about these concepts called the unique value proposition or the unique sales proposition. What you want is when somebody lands on your website, you want them to quickly identify, this is a company that solves my problem, and it's crystal clear what it is, and it's not just the standard language that you see on every single website. If you land on the homepage of a website, again, I'll use roofers as an example. They may list the things that they do, you know, new roofs, roof repair, hail damage, blah blah blah. Okay, well, there's nothing that's different about that. So you need to talk about, you're the only certainty certified installer of this type of a product. That's where you're starting to get some differentiation. It's all about differentiation, and positioning why that's important and a competitive advantage for why somebody should be hiring you. It's ultimately down to giving people in the simplest, quickest form why they should hire you.
Yeah, yeah, and we'll dig into this more, but it seems like it's very common for businesses not to have this in place.
Yep, absolutely.
Paul, the next question is, why does a business need a core difference?
Yeah, this ties into what Ken just said is if you don't have a core difference, you're going to wind up competing on price. And you probably don't want to do that because it comes down to transformation, if you will. People are looking, they have a problem and they they're looking for someone to solve that problem. So you have to let them know how you are different from your competition, how you can solve their problem better than someone else can. And like I said, if you don't do that, you're competing on price. And like Ken said, he talked about certainty, or if it's hardy siding, we have a client that talks about the nails they use to put on hardy siding are like $500 a box. And why do they do that?
Hmm.
And they talk about, first of all, Hardy recommends this and how they're more durable. They don't rust, and they're made for that because hardy siding, that's some heavy stuff. And
Also
they're
doesn't damage your home.
right. It's the length of these nails are made specifically for the thickness of hardy siding and the the studs that they're going into. And a lot of companies, they use these longer fasteners that can go into wires or plumbing, and it happens. So that's a core difference. It's that we go the extra mile. We do these extra things. We use more expensive products, but in the end, you're getting a better quality installation of your hardy siding. And it's those kind of core differences that people will look at. Okay, you're always going to have people that are all they care about is price, and you probably don't want them as a customer anyway. So that core difference is, this is why you should pay us a little bit more, because you're getting a better quality product. You're getting better service.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think back to all of the days that I did government proposals. And, governments by law are required to go out and unless there's a specific contractual situation where they can go sole source. And there are some of those, but even to get a sole source contract or general competing for government contracts where they're going out to multiple vendors, you either need to look at it, or is it low price or is it best value? And if you don't have a way to articulate best value, which is really what this ultimately all comes down to, you're like Paul said, you're going to be competing on price all day long. And that means that your profit margins are going to be lower when we're getting into an economy where there's a lot of uncertainty and softness in the economy potentially. Those businesses have a much harder time surviving. So differentiation is critical.
Yeah. No, and that's a great point. Like, I think anybody that started a business, you get in that trap of undervaluing your time initially. A lot of people do that. And so you discount your services or your products. But that's unsustainable. And everybody comes to that realization that you have to have something different than price to compete on, or unless you're a Walmart or something that, you have the operation that can compete on price, but then it's a quantity, it's a
more than quantity though. It's optimized. I mean, it's optimized everything.
Yeah.
Because if you're competing on price, you've had to optimize your profit margin every other possible way that you can.
Yeah. 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 Well, this brings us to a question I had for Jen. And so we have a recording for her. And it's, how can a business determine what their core difference is?
So determining what your core difference is as a business can be a really difficult thing. And it can be really difficult because right off the top of a business owner's head, if you ask them what's your difference, they will rattle off 2 or 3 things that they think makes them different if they haven't already done a core difference program. And what I mean by that is really going through the exercise to figure out what your core difference is. There's something to be said about understanding or thinking about what your core difference is or what you want it to be. But your core difference really is someplace between what the market needs, where there's a gap, where you can fill that gap, what your customers say about you, what your customers' reasons for staying with you and continuing to do business with you, what those reasons are, why they chose to do business with you instead of other competitors in your market. And those reasons can make up your core difference. We find it's very important to have your core difference developed from a couple of different angles. Well, I guess 3 different angles. One, of course, what you, the business owner, your team, your company feels is different about your product or service. Number 2, what your existing customers say is different about your product or service, and then and why they continue to work with you, and 3, where the gap is in the market that you can fill. And once you can put that into a very succinct message, that's going to be the thing that really helps you stand out. And what's neat about having a core difference that has been developed that way is you're going to sound different, and your team, your employees, you're all going to be able to stand behind what you say your difference is, because it's the way you do business. You're just pulling out and putting a spotlight on what really makes you different.
That's a great explanation. One of the things I think that we should add in at this point is one of the ways we can pull the Band-Aid off or uncover the pain point of not having a core difference. If you're a business owner and you're listening to this right now, if you pull up your website and compare it to 4 or 5 others, direct competitors in your marketplace, and this works for any type of business. You pull up the websites, you look at everything above the fold. So everything that you can see on the screen when it first comes up, it is very, very telling about how your business has been positioned and how your competitors are positioning their usually their core difference, or whether they are totally lacking a core difference, whether your business is lacking a core difference. Because what first immediately hits people when you land on their website should be the most important thing you can be talking about. And so that's a great strategy of just going in to determine, hey, is this something that we're lacking in our business right now?
Yep.
And guys, I don't know if you see this, but all the time, like when we do a strategy first implementation, part of the first step is to do the market research and understand the businesses and go through their website. And we do this process that I just outlined, and it is incredible. I can't even think of one time when obviously the client who's hiring us, they already have a felt need. So part of that felt need is probably a missing core difference. But when we compare them with the competition, it's just vanilla. It's every business, whether it's a roofing company, a dentist, a software company, you name it. Usually the main competitors in the marketplace, unless they really have their act together, have just kind of gone to the easy thing to say or the thing they think that people want to hear. But what happens is, or the most obvious thing to say, right? Like we're roofers in Bradford, Ontario, or New York City, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is that every other roofer is saying the exact same thing,
which is the commoditization
yeah,
of what you're doing. And there's nothing different when you're talking about commodities.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that
Yeah.
goes back to what Paul said about, if you commoditize something, not the only thing, like they can choose businesses on numerous different criteria, but price usually becomes one of the top criteria. The other one is just how they feel, or what colors were used on the website, or
Right.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. In StoryBrand, we also talk about this concept called the grunt test. Can you look at a website and grunt within 5 seconds of what it is that business does?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a great example.
Yeah, I think what you talked about in terms of, looking at, remove all of the branding, just read what you can see above the fold, and do that for 5 business, the business that you are either working with or your business, and then look at your competitors. Can you tell them apart?
Yeah.
Yep.
And Ken, that leads nicely into the next question for you. How can you create a core difference? So Jen talked about, how can you determine how, like, gathering the information of how to determine what your core difference might be, but then how do you create it?
Yeah. Well, I'm a huge believer in focusing on the problems that you solve.
Yeah.
And for all of us, my business included, I've struggled with this in the past. I think I'm better than most these days, but I still fall into the trap because it's such an easy trap to fall into. And that is, that we don't talk about the problems in the language of our customers. We talk about problems in the way that we deal with it in a technical, jargonistic way all the time. And we've talked about tuck pointing in the past, and it's like, that always sticks in my mind, partly because it's kind of close to my last name, but it's like I honestly never ever really exactly remember what it is. I'm getting better now because I use it so many times as an example. But if it's like, we do duck pointing in this area, it's like, okay, well, what the heck is that? talk about the problem that you solve. We fix leaks and bricks or whatever you need to say. I mean, which I think is what tuck pointing is, if I remember right. And I'm revealing my ignorance here, but yeah. So focus on the problems that you solve. And I think talking with your customers and getting an understanding of why they feel like you're the right business to work with is a huge thing, because they're going to tell you in words that you probably don't even think about, and you may be even solving problems for them that you hadn't even really thought about. So that's another great thing. I think you also, this is going to be very much tied to the type of business that you have and the products or services that you offer. But keep in mind, marketing is about transformation. And, Paul mentioned James Hardie Siding earlier. James Hardie Siding it's really an aspirational kind of a thing. Or if you want to go buy a Jaguar or a Hummer or something like that, that's an aspirational thing. So you need to take people on a journey when you're talking about your core difference, about how they're here today and how you're going to, by working with you or buying your product or service, you're going to transform them into what they want to become. And I think when you look at those things, you can make tremendous headway on establishing a core difference. Finally, I'll just say simply, if you do this, you're probably going to be different if you just go through this exercise, because as you said earlier, Ian, most businesses don't do this. They talk about, they just blurt out, we do roofing, we do gutters. Okay, well, great. I could go do a search in my area and I could find 100 companies who does that. Why would I want to hire you? Tell me why I want to hire you. And then the last thing that I'll say is, we live in an age where online reputation is critical for findability.
Yeah.
And so to the extent that you can define and articulate your core difference, that makes it easy for you to pass along and build a corporate culture, because everybody who works in your business potentially is got some customer service or sales role. And so when you have that core point of difference, it makes it easier for you to talk with, your team and get them to be able to say that as well. Whether it's an elevator pitch, whether it's, just talking to somebody who may be in a place to refer somebody for you to get a new employee, which is a super important thing. If you can articulate that point of difference, it's huge.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and you brought up a good point too, Ken, that like you might even have one core point of difference that you, depending what it is, you leverage it for customers, prospects, that kind of interaction. And in some core differences can actually translate really well for internal communication as well, or as a messaging platform, but some
Right.
don't. And you might need to modify, alter, create a new one for your hiring process, because it's marketing for hiring is the exact same as marketing for customers. It's just a different target audience and the things you have to do, right?
It is, and maybe it's even different for every product and service that you offer. And that starts to take a lot of time and energy. So you obviously have to triage it and work on the things that are most important for your business first. But you're exactly right. I mean, I was talking to a friend of ours, Nina, Ian,
Mm-hmm.
and we're talking about, maybe working on a joint project together for a nonprofit. And for nonprofits, it's really tricky because you've got the constituents that you serve, you've got possible donors and sponsors and supporters, and then you've got maybe volunteers,
Mm-hmm.
and then you may also be trying to hire people to come and work for your organization. Those are four very different things, but they can be tied together, with overall with that, point of differentiation.
Yeah, and just to give this conversation a little bit of, tangibility or legs to it, just to describe the process that, and I think it sounds like we all do a similar process, but to describe a process that we did for a remodeling business. They were vanilla, right? They looked and smelled and tasted like every other remodeling business in their city. And so we went through the process of interviewing their best customers, the ones they wanted to attract more of. We interviewed some strategic partners, and we interviewed some of their people. And it is incredible the continuity of thought and kind of the stream of consciousness that we were able to gather through those interviews. But then, just what you were saying about reviews, we also go through their customers' reviews, because essentially that's like a micro interview, right? Somebody's sharing their experience, and you can pull out keywords. And one of the things we do as well is we pull all of the data into a Word doc. We pull out the words that we don't want to pay attention to, like the name of the company and stuff like that, or even the service type, and then we create a word cloud. So out of all of the interviews, out of all of the reviews, what words pop up the most, So for example, with this remodeling business, communication was one of the most used words throughout everything. Courtesy was another one, right? And so it was really it was really interesting to see just what was pulled out. And then there was a host of other ones that followed that. But those things helped shape what we recommended as a core difference for them about redefining the remodeling experience for their customers, because it really was and one of the things that was interesting is I think there's also kind of I mentioned earlier about when you first start up, you're so hungry that you're willing to do anything for the job, kind of thing. So there's a maturity in a business that usually you get to a point where you're like, okay, like we can't compete on price anymore, or we've been doing this for years now. We know we're exceptional. We have great reviews. We have great return customers. How do we then express that to the marketplace so that it attracts more people that are looking for that? So in the case of this remodeling business, one of the things that they found was they were attracting people who had bad experiences and were looking for something radically different, right? So we wanted to express that in their core difference. But hopefully that gives a little bit more shape of how you kind of go about doing it.
Well, and we have a special podcast next Tuesday with
Yes.
Dr. J.J. Peterson from StoryBrand, and that's really going to unpack this, in a whole new light.
I'm super excited about that. Next question is for Paul. Paul, as with any kind of marketing strategy, any kind of marketing activity, there's things you should do, things you should try to avoid, minefields you don't want to step into. Maybe you can share some of those related to developing a core difference.
Yeah, one thing you don't want to do is, say we have great customer service. Well, everybody says that. What are you going to say? Yeah, we don't care about our customers. It's like that movie Clerks. This job would be great if it weren't for the customers. I mean, everybody's going to say we have great customer service, and it's kind of like banner blindness. People just ignore that. So it goes back to what Ken said and what you said. You have to differentiate yourself. What makes you different? And think of it as an elevator pitch. Keep it short, keep it impactful, and it has to describe what you do and what makes you different from your competition. And you don't want to be changing it on a weekly basis, but you don't be afraid to test out some different things. There's different ways to say the same thing. So sometimes you're just going to have to test these things, try different things, but yeah, just don't use these vanilla, like I said, we have great customer service, and you don't want to talk about price. Hey, even if you start, affordable is okay, I guess, but then you're getting into this realm of you're putting this idea in their head that goes back to competing on price, and you don't want to do that. And Ken, just Don't ask me why I know this. I have all kinds of obscure, weird knowledge, but tuck pointing is the process of removing the mortar from joints, replacing it, and then actually down the center putting a contrasting color, as opposed to repointing, which is simply removing and replacing the mortar between joints. So now you know.
Thank you.
You sounded like a Google answer there. That was awesome.
That was awesome. Yeah. You know, and a lot of the things that Paul mentioned about the don'ts, you know, that doesn't mean you can't use stuff like that. Like you can't say that you provide excellent customer service. That's just not enough, because that's not like
Yeah, that can't be your only thing.
yeah, you can add that on top of it. We're, you know, we are the top rated, highest rated customer satisfaction company in St. Louis that does this. You know, I mean, now that's a little bit better. If you also say that's certified to do this, and that's truly unique, then it's even better. So, you know, it could be layers of things that you need to put together. You want to keep it simple though, because you want it to be clear and easy to understand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you probably don't even want to use the term customer service if that's what everybody else is talking about. You might want to reframe. It's about reframing the conversation, right? Because ideally, when you do this right, you're reframing the conversation in such a way that you're making it very difficult, if not impossible, for your competition to compete with you, right? Because you're talking about, this is what makes us unique. Just like, you know, my nose is unique, you know, whatever, my face is unique. When just like we have personal characteristics, this is a characteristic of a business that you want to highlight and elevate such that people are attracted to it.
It's absolutely staggering to me, you know, just to go back to what you said at the very beginning, Ian. You know, we work on a lot of websites. We review a lot of website content. It's amazing to me how many businesses don't even look to see what is on their website. The written content, you know, even if they're paying somebody to do it, you know, there are grammatical errors. There are, you know, there's poor page layout, you know, in terms of SEO structure, and by not using, you know, header tags and things like that appropriately, long run-on sentences. So, I mean, that is also something that you have to think about. I mean, that's a don't. Don't do those things, because that erodes any differentiation claim that you might make where you're trying to sell on value. Because if people look and your website's basically crap because it's got typos riddled, you know, throughout it, you've just destroyed your the goodwill that you've built by talking about something that sounded like a pretty cool point of difference, but now it's like, really? Anyway, yeah. Just another don't.
Well, and Ken, that's a super important point. I've seen this in lots of businesses over the years where they talk about how they deliver quality for their customers, and yet they didn't proofread their website. Or I think today this is becoming even more prevalent and a bigger minefield with a lot of overseas copywriting, AI, so artificial intelligence copywriting. You still need to proofread your stuff. You know, make sure a human with good grammatical skills, who is better than you, right, is proofreading everything, because there's some people with that superpower that will just bring, you know, much better writing quality, and it reflects on your business for sure. Yeah, great point. The next question is, sorry, go ahead, Paul.
If one of the things you're talking about is quality, don't misspell quality. I've actually seen that.
Okay, no joke. There's some people I respect so much because they're super, super smart, and they're actually like mentors to me in my business running. Like they're an authority I look to. And I've noticed this over the years, that as rapid execution has become kind of a mantra for many businesses, that either they're outsourcing their writing, or they're using AI. But I can't tell you the number of, I feel sad every time I see it, whether it's in a printed book that they've recently published and there's typos, not a lot, but a few, right? You're getting through there. And because they've elevated themselves and you expect a high level of quality from them, not just quality information, but quality delivery, it's always a shock to the system when you're like, dude, like just send it to a proper editor and have them proofread it beforehand, because that's just sad, right? But especially emails.
QWALT quality.
The next question is for Jen. She recorded an answer to, where can you leverage your core difference in your marketing once you have it?
So where can you leverage your core difference in your marketing? So your core difference, your core messaging, that can be leveraged virtually anywhere that you have printed or written or audio, I was going to say spoken word. So your core message will be, a body of text, which can be then whittled down to a tagline, a couple of sentences and a much larger explanation, depending on what kind of area you're going to put your information on. So for example, if there's like an about us on your website, you're going to probably have a much longer explanation about your company and what's different about you than if you have a spot, say you're doing some sponsorship and you have one line to explain what your company is and why you're different. So really, your website, any kind of written communications, any kind of audio communications, any kind of visual communication in your advertising, in your social media, any kind of signage that you have outdoor. And also as well, your core message isn't just something that's just written down on your website or on your marketing materials. It's got to be a lively part of the conversation, meaning that your salespeople are going to have to be able to integrate the core message into their presentations. I mean, it's going to come up naturally. What's different about you guys? Why should we go with you guys, compared to the competition? Same within everybody. We would suggest everybody in your company know what the core difference is, why you're different, and be able to talk about it. As well as, depending on how large or small your company is, frequently the business owner is out there doing the networking and the sales and whatnot. So they are going to feel that it's much easier to explain their core difference in a very succinct sentence or two, and be able to deliver that very, very, very well. So those are some of the places you can leverage your core difference in your marketing.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to understand that, your core difference is a very, it's a punchy way to get something across immediately, but it's the rest of your communications that is then the supportive information for it. So and as an example, when I was talking about the remodeling experience redefined for that one client, we talk about how communication is a core for them, and how they've redefined how they do communication to support that. We talk about the process that they have in place in order to not just help deliver great remodeling, but also how throughout that the communication is a key, and how it redefines the experience, and then what they do at the end of the process to ensure that the client is super, super satisfied. Again, it's all about the redefining that experience, but that's a thread that's right through everything on their website. And then, of course, if you have a really great core difference, you can leverage that in, Ken, you talked about maybe you need a different core difference in each of your services, but sometimes you can just modify the core difference. So for this example, the kitchen remodeling experience redefined, the bathroom remodeling experience redefined. So that's how we leverage that across their whole website. And of course, that works really, really well once you start doing advertising, social media. It's a thread and a kind of a pyramid. You've got your core difference at the top, but you have all these other supportive pieces that kind of flesh out the idea of how you fulfill that core difference.
Yeah. Yeah, Jen mentioned in her first answer, looking at where there's a gap, talking to your best customers, talking to your employees, evaluating from your own perspective. and then looking at the marketplace. And in some cases, you might need to, I mean, this is a bigger problem than just a marketing problem potentially, because if there's a big problem that nobody is answering in your business, in your industry or your niche, an easy one to go to is, contractors leaving a mess. I mean, that's a common problem that you hear if you work with a lot
Absolutely.
of contractors. So the contractors that figured that out early and said, look, we get it. An HVAC contractor, for example, we get it. When we come in, we're going to leave your home as clean or cleaner than when we first got there.
Yep.
That's going to resonate with a lot of people. Now, that may mean that you need to spend time changing your business processes, retraining some employees. But again, it gives you that point of differentiation that if that's a common problem that is stopping people from doing business with you and or from a lot of other of your competitors, and you have the opportunity to pick those folks up because of that, you might want to make that investment. So gap analysis is absolutely critical in this whole process.
Yeah, if you install whole house vacuums, you probably shouldn't leave a mess. But Ian, you said something about bathroom remodeling, redefine, kitchen remodeling, redefine, and that's a thread, and that's something I don't know if it's really part of this podcast, but brand consistency is really important.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a do.
Yeah.
Make sure you have brand consistency.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible to think about the power this has in a business. And sometimes your core difference doesn't need to be I'm trying to think of the right word. You're trying to get across a feeling to the person that's reading it, right? You're trying to make a connection that they're like, yes, like these guys get it, right? So, sometimes those supportive elements are right below it, right? The pain points that you solve, or the unique things you do to fulfill that that core difference. I totally agree with you, Ken. Like any kind of trade, if you don't clean up after yourself, or if you do, putting it the other way, if you do clean up after yourself, you better be talking about that, because it is incredible the number of tradespeople that do not clean up after themselves and leave the homeowner, the business owner, with a horrible mess that then they have to clean up. Just as a funny example, when I moved into a basement apartment, when I was younger, before I got married, it was my first place of my own. And I had to get high-speed internet in because I had my own business and I needed high-speed internet in there. So first of all, they were about 8 hours late getting there, which is a whole other thing. But then the guy was running the internet across the room because the box was on one side of the room. It wasn't a very big install. It was like 20 feet of cable to install, but he ran it over my bed and left a whole bunch of extra cable for me to like run around the bed after, because he was in such a rush. He just had to get out of there, right? Like he was late at night, and no apology, just like he was out of there. Like I thought he was coming back to fix it, and he never came back. And like
he was 8 hours late.
But I think that's just like anybody who's had to hire tradespepeople. Like everybody probably has a story like that where it's like, I can't believe they did that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, see, that's why now when you schedule any kind of installation, they say, well, we'll be there between 8 in the morning and 8 at night. So just make yourself available.
Yeah,
they did say that. They were still 8 hours late.
Wow. Well, I mean, another thing too, is just the way you conduct yourself. I mean, it's like when you talk about anything medical, one of the things that pops up over and over and over again is bedside manner and consideration. And because, I mean, if it's a medical situation, people are uncomfortable. They've got anxiety, and if you're adding to that, that's another don't. So, you want to accentuate the positive, and you want to try to eliminate the negative. And it's, we all live. It's easy for us to fall into a trap of where we live in our own world or in our own bubble, and we don't really fully appreciate, what everybody else is experiencing and dealing with.
Yeah.
Like that TV show House, don't do this.
That's right. But that raises a really good question or a point, Ken, that you can't. So no matter how much effort you put into a core difference, if you deliver crap, if you serve people poorly, if you're mean-spirited or short with your customers, your patients, nothing's going to solve for that. You might be able to attract more people with a great website, great advertising, but you're just going to have a leaky bucket, right? So that's a great point, that make sure that you can do it in tandem too. You can boost your marketing, but make sure you never forget that you have to serve your customers and patients with excellence, or it will ultimately erode your business over time.
And that's never been more relevant than it is now. I mean, there are so many businesses that are struggling to staff and hang on to employees. I mean, I rarely go to fast food restaurants, but I did happen to try to go by one the other day. It was, first of all, their Google business page said they were open. They weren't open. Nobody even was there to respond. A couple of days later, from some crazy reason, we decided to try it again. And this time they were open during the business hours, but they weren't doing any business and then with no explanation, and I know that that's a problem that so many businesses are dealing with right now. I don't know what the answer is to that. I'm not even sure why I'm bringing it up, but other than you can do all of this really great hard work, and it doesn't take a lot to erode that away.
Yeah.
If you have internal problems, none of this matters. And that's something a lot of businesses don't, I don't know, they don't want to look at it or they don't want to admit it. But if you have issues with customer service, or like Ken said, you're not open when you say you are, if you have these internal problems, none of this is going to matter. So you almost have to address that first.
Yeah, or you just, like, I think anybody who's been in business for a while knows that your business is a living, breathing organism, essentially, right? Because it's made up of people, and that you depending on how fast you're scaling, depending on the marketplace, right? A lot of tradespeople right now, actually, a lot of any businesses are really struggling with hiring and having enough personnel to fulfill their services. So I think it's important. Again, I think you can do it in tandem, because it's almost like just the nature of business now. You're gonna have your ups and downs, but yeah, don't lose focus. Guys, I thought, I don't know if you have any anecdotal stories related to core differences that you wanted to share. I tried to kind of weave one through our conversation that I had, but now would be a great time if you want to share any. Or we can talk about something else.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just, again, I one of the tools that we use is the elements of value pyramid.
Yeah.
Because again, based on the nature of the product or service that you're delivering, there are different things. I mean, it could be very existential what somebody needs. They literally need food. They have to get your product. A great example from a service perspective, water restoration services. I mean, if you've got water coming into your house and doing damage, you've got to get somebody out there as quickly as possible. In those situations, differentiation is important, but it may not be the end all be all. So I mean, it's always important, don't get me wrong, but when people are in an existential crisis, they're going to make decisions and go with somebody that looks like the first credible business that they can find. In many cases, that may or may not be the best thing to do, but so you've got very existential, when you're talking about health and safety related things. But then, like I mentioned earlier, when you've got the aspirational stuff, when you've got bigger ticket items, a kitchen and bathroom model, or a, James Hardy siding project, or buying a luxury car, or buying that, in some cases, buying a brand new home is an aspirational thing. In other cases, it's an existential thing. Just realize who your ideal clients are, and that's where your messaging and your core point of difference needs to align with. Who are your ideal customers, and what are their needs?
Yeah. And I would argue, Ken, that if your business specializes in serving people in crisis, right? Because there's lots and lots of businesses that do that, and they do it because they can charge a premium, right? But the business, where I'm going with this is a plumber that specializes in urgent need, and it expresses that through their core difference and through their messaging everywhere. Meaning when you type in plumber town, your town, and it comes up with a blurb that says, basement flooding, call us, 24-hour service, whatever, right? So if you can weave your core difference in there and it has their biggest pain point, and you serve that particular community, you will always win over the guy that just says, plumber in New York, we fix taps or something, right? Like, because people are making decisions so fast, but they're still making a decision. Usually it's not just, even if you're in a crisis, you're going to quickly look at the reviews real quick and go,
right.
Oh,
yeah. Even if you might go check out 3 different websites, and like you said, if the 3 different websites that you check out, 2 of those don't talk about urgency and emergency service, even if they do it, they probably won't get that business if the 3rd one does.
Yeah. And just to kind of tie in a ribbon on all of this, regardless of your business, whether you're B2B, B2C, healthcare, therapist, roofer, like this is true across any type of business, restaurant, right? Like, you can maximize a core difference and leverage a core difference in any type of business, because it really, that something is unique about your business, and it's all about uncovering that a little bit more from the client's or customer's perspective or patient's perspective, and then being able to express that in a way that resonates with them, so you attract more people like that. Any last thoughts, comments, guys?
Make sure you tune in next Tuesday for Dr. JJ Peterson, who's head of StoryBrand and also host of the Marketing Made Simple podcast, so we can even talk about this topic even more.
Yep. It's going to be awesome. Well, I think this is a good place to wrap up, guys. Thank you, Ken, Paul, and Virtual Jen, for sharing your thoughts on this important topic. Thank you for you, our audience. We do it for you. So hopefully you found value in this conversation. Please share it with other people that could leverage this information, and share the link. And until next week, next Tuesday, because we're having a special episode, as Ken mentioned, keep calm and market on.